Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be looking at Project 100,000, or more commonly known as McNamara's morons. It was introduced in the 1960s by Secretary of Defense McNamara and the United States Departments of Defense. I'm now going to refer to that as the DoD for simplicity reasons. It was designed to recruit soldiers who had failed medical and mental standards. However, the project was then ended in 1971. But why did they introduce this? I mean, if they have standards for a reason, don't they? Well, this was due to the fact that the US needed more men for the meat grinder that was Vietnam, as by 1960, casualties were piling on, and with very little effect on Viet Cong soldiers. Now, the US had previously done projects like this during World War II. This was mainly just to do with the fact that they would want them for not frontline purposes, but more or less building purposes, creating pontoons for landings and sort of developing railways and stuff. However, that wasn't really the case with McNamara's morons. This was more or less a frontline only position, and in fact, as we'll see later, it was across all the services. Now, who were the people that were commonly recruited into this? Now, it's most known that it was people on the autistic scale, as commonly featured with Forrest Gump, which we'll mention later. However, it was also a wide range of people. It was people who were under and overweight, so those formed a majority of them due to the fact that they were a lot of overweight and underweight people, depending on where you were in the States. It was also people with mental disabilities, like I mentioned, but also people who couldn't speak English. So this would include immigrants from other countries. It could include people from Vietnam itself who had escaped to the US, who were then being sent back. Now, why was it brought upon? Well, the official reasoning at the time was due to President Lyndon B. Johnson's War on Poverty speech. Now, this was essentially a speech talking about how Vietnam was good in many ways due to the fact that it was ending poverty, along with other plans he had to try and get rid of poverty, as at the time the US was still recovering from a lot of poverty and it would take a while. Very much similar to what you'd see in the Great Depression, for example. It still had that sort of problems with unemployment, as due to the fact that it was a capitalist country, of course, it was very much based on the education you could get at the time, which again wasn't always available for everyone. Now, the people who were recruited as part of this project were known as from the United States Army perspective as the New Standards Men. However, they were more commonly known among the troops as the Moron Corps. They had previously scored in Category 4 of the Armed Forces Qualification Test, which placed them in the 10th to 30th percentile range. This essentially meant that they had been deemed unfit for service, whether that be due to mental aptitude or physical aptitude. So the program was called Project 100,000. However, that wasn't the official number for people recruited. That was just the aim. The number recruited is believed to be between 320,000 to 354,000 that were recruited into it. In total, however, the US Army received 71% of these men, while the Marines and the Navy got 10% each, and the Air Force 9%. So again, it's a mostly US Army-based group, due to the fact that the US Army was bearing the brunt of the Viet Cong warfare against them. Although it was originally shown to the public as being a project to help with allowing veterans to get jobs, it was heavily criticised, and in 1989, a Department of Defense study showed that non-veterans were far better off than veterans, even though at the time it was believed that veterans would gain more employment. That is because it was believed that if people joined up as part of the New Standards Men program, or Project 100,000, or whatever you want to call it, that they would gain sort of skills that they could then apply following the war. However, it was found that people who didn't join up, or people who dodged the draft, because again it was part of the draft, were just better off. They also discovered that most veterans were also divorced as well, following the war. So again, a lot of problems with public relations there. However, nowadays, it's not believed to have been created for that reason. It's actually believed to be created because the US Army didn't want to call on reserves or students for filling in the ranks. This is due to the fact that at the time, there was increasing anti-Vietnam War protests going on. Of course, we see this with things like draft dodging, self-inflicted injuries to prevent it, and even people leaving for Canada as well to try and escape the draft due to the fact that Canada was not part of the war. So at this point in time, we are seeing severe problems with sort of anti-Vietnam War protests, and as we know, in many ways, the Vietnam War was lost due to the fact that public opinion had turned against it, due to the fact that it was the first ever proper TV shown war. So that is one of the reasons believed as to why it was created, because people who were part of McNamara's Morons were believed to have been easy to quite recruit because of the fact that they had been unable to gain employment previously, especially people with mental disabilities and those who couldn't speak English. Now, one of the greatest films that will ever show you this concept of McNamara's Morons is Forrest Gump, or Forrest Gump. And that's mainly because of the fact that it shows that the character Forrest Gump has an IQ of 75, and it does show him in the combat situation. Another film that I meant to mention, is Full Metal Jacket, which, although doesn't show him in the combat, the main character who shoots the drill sergeant is shown as being one of those people who is overweight. So, again, part of the new standards men. So it's sort of these films that really help show it, and in fact, these films eventually actually allowed it to be far widely known to more people due to the fact that the Department of Defense obviously was trying to cover up this mistake, as not many of these veterans returned. This is mainly due to the fact that underweight and overweight soldiers, of course, couldn't keep up with the physical fitness required of soldiers, and therefore would oftentimes die or get injured quicker. People who couldn't speak English, again, lots of problems with communicating with infantry squads and commanders. Other historical examples of problems with language barriers would be Austria-Hungary during World War I, where they were made up of Serbs, Croatians, Bosnians, that sort of thing. And then it's mostly the people with mental disabilities that focus on the most, and that is just due to the fact that it is now known that sort of these levels of stress that would normally induce PTSD amongst average people was far worse for people on the autistic spectrum because it was so traumatic for them. So thank you all for watching. I know it's a rather shorter video for me, since I'd normally try to make them 10 minutes long, but I thought this would be a not fun, but interesting topic to look at. That's something that couldn't maybe make 10 minutes. Thank you for watching.